Writing a research grant is about so much more than just filling out paperwork. And today we're going to talk about one of the most important skills that you need to develop as a grant writer, and that is storytelling. If you're new around here, my name is Sarah Dobson. I'm a research grant consultant, and my team and I help early career researchers write clear and compelling and competitive research grant applications. So you may think to yourself, or you may have heard people talk about grant writing in research as trying to sell your science. And I generally don't like thinking about your research that way and research grants that way, in large part because it's kind of icky, right? Like nobody really wants to think about selling their science. But what is really underneath that is the story you need to tell and sell about why your research is important. And so if we can look at it more like storytelling and about, in particular, making a connection with your audience, that I think, first of all, is a bit more appealing as a concept to wrap your head around when you're writing a grant. And I personally think it's much more true to what it is that you are actually doing. So let's talk about what storytelling in a research grant context actually means. So what we're talking about here is the argument that you're making for why your research is important, why you've assembled the right team to do the work as you have proposed it, and why the project is feasible, why and how the project is feasible, right? Those are really the three big questions that your peer reviewers are asking themselves when they're reading your grant, of course, alongside the specific scoring criteria, but they're asking themselves, is this research worth doing? Is this the right team to be doing the research? And is this project feasible? And so what you are trying to do is tell that story in a convincing and persuasive way. And the way that I help PIs do this, both in a consulting capacity and in a teaching capacity when I teach grant writing classes, is to use frameworks to help you lay that out really clearly and logically. Because in any biomedical research grant, you are laying out this argument by drawing on existing literature, right? You're setting the stage to explain the wider scientific problem that your proposal is situated within, right? What's the big scientific problem that you and your colleagues are trying to solve, and what's the gap in knowledge that your proposal is seeking to fill, right? And how does that contribute to solving that larger scientific problem? That's how we get at the storytelling in any biomedical research grant, is really laying that out very clearly by drawing on the literature, by drawing on your preliminary data, and by making a strong case, first of all, for the scientific premise of what you're doing, right? That's the, is this research worth doing piece. That's a big part of how you answer that question. And then when it comes to the question about the team, is this the right team to do this work? Can we trust them to do this work? What you're doing is laying out an argument, both implicit and explicit, for why you have the right people in the right roles to conduct this research. And when I say implicit, what I mean by that is you are signaling in subtle ways the expertise of the team. And so, for example, you might be drawing on prior productivity around publications, or in the collection of preliminary data that you use in this application, right? That would be a more sort of implicit way to signal the expertise of the team. But then the explicit way to do that would be in your bio sketches or your CVs, or a statement in the body of the grant about the expertise of the team, right? So that's what I mean by the difference between implicitly and explicitly signaling the expertise of the team. And then the third question that you are trying to answer and weave into the story is about feasibility. And that really comes down to, can you do what you say you are going to do in the time and within the budget that you are proposing, right? And that part is somewhat about the strategic alignment of your project proposal and the requirements of the funding opportunity, right? So if you are proposing a 5-year project, but the scope of the funding opportunity is only for 3 years, that's obviously a mismatch. And so you're going to have a hard time explaining that you can do this work within the 3-year scope of the grant when it's really a 5-year project that you're proposing, right? So some of this is strategic alignment and looking closely at the funding opportunity in front of you and whether the project is a good fit. But then the rest of it, of course, is around describing the rigor of the experimental design that you are proposing and the ways that you are going to mitigate potential pitfalls, right? So it's really about rigor and about thinking through what might go wrong and how you're going to work around that so that you'll still be able to come out the other side with some clear outcomes. And the clearer you can be about the expected outcomes and how you will achieve them, even in the face of potential challenges, the more convincing that part of your application will be, right? So when we talk about storytelling, we're talking about weaving these 3 big questions together in a way that is logical and compelling for your audience. So let's talk for a second about what compelling means in this context. Compelling means that you are speaking to the right people, that the audience for your grant application is already halfway on board with your idea because they care about the same subject matter that you care about. And the way to make sure that you are speaking to the right audience and that you only have to do kind of half of the work when it comes to being compelling and being persuasive. The homework that you have to do around that is to make sure that your grant is framed in a way so that it lands in front of the right peer reviewers, right? And so part of that is making sure that you have the right keywords in place so that your application is assigned to reviewers who already get it, who already have roughly the same subject matter expertise that you do and are likely to come up to speed very quickly on what it is that you're proposing. So then your job is really just to say, we're all on the same page about how important the problem in front of us is, and here is the gap in knowledge that I'm trying to fill that's going to get us closer to solving this bigger problem, and here's how I'm going to do it, right? So if you can make sure that at least the people who are reading your grant all agree that the problem is the same, that you all agree that the problem is important, then the work that you have to do is really just about explaining how you arrived at the gap in knowledge that you're trying to fill and how you arrived at the research question or the hypothesis that you are using to motivate the design of your project, right? So that's the piece around being compelling and persuasive. You want to sort of do as much as you can in advance to ensure that the grant ends up in front of the right audience so that it makes everybody's job easier. It makes the grant that you're putting in front of your reviewers more likely to be exciting to them, which is definitely the emotion that you want to elicit from any peer reviewer who's reading your application. But it also makes it easier on you because you don't have to spend as much time in your very limited page limit in your grant application. You don't have to spend as much time bringing your reviewers up to speed. And so if you can do that homework at the outset and figure out what the breadth and the depth of the expertise in the peer review group is, you'll be able to better frame your application so that it'll meet your reviewers where they're at in terms of their general level of subject matter expertise in your field. And that really depends a lot on which funding agency you are submitting to and how many different peer review groups there are, and the level of breadth versus depth of the expertise on any one of those peer review groups. So that is definitely strategic homework that you ought to be doing in advance to enhance your storytelling. So if you found this useful, I want to let you know that I am hosting a 6-week free Fundamentals of Grant Writing for Research class starting in mid-May 2025. We are going to go into the skills and frameworks that I believe are necessary for any biomedical research grant applicant, no matter where you are applying. These are foundational skills, these are core skills that you need to master if you want to be a successful grant writer over the long term and write clear and persuasive and exciting grant applications that are highly, highly competitive. So if you're interested in joining me for that free course starting in mid-May, there is a link below this video in the description for you to sign up, and I will see you in mid-May.